After a hard-fought negotiation between Francis Ngannou and the UFC, you got to think to yourself, where does all this end with Dana White's pursuit, or is he really indifferent about the entire thing because of the fact that the UFC is exactly what it is, a machine that just keeps on running without the necessary need of one particular person, and that can even include some of the biggest stars in the world, including Conor McGregor and maybe even Jon Jones himself. So you got to ask yourselves, right? The Saudis were able to make this fight with absolute ease. Why? Because they're able to pay off everybody. Now, in Dana White's case, could he have just waited for the Saudis to approach him and say something to the effect that, you know what? I know that the UFC wants a certain amount of split when it comes to sharing their athletes in boxing shows, in particular Conor McGregor with Floyd Mayweather. But as the Saudis, they're going to pay double more than anybody else, and they have endless amounts of resources. So because of those endless amounts of resources that they can push out there, the UFC could have got a cut of the deal while paying Francis Ngannou the same amount of price that they would have given him with or without the UFC. Now, Francis Ngannou just basically cut out the middleman, which was going to be the UFC, and just took all the money for himself in this particular boxing match. Now, you got to ask yourselves, right? Does Dana White have a reason as to why he's not allowing Francis Ngannou to box? Because the $1 million question, or for that matter, the $100 million question is, why did he allow Conor McGregor to box and not Francis Ngannou? Well, for one, you got to think. They're both the same in a sense of being knockout artists. Conor McGregor had a one-shot knockout power that he displayed against Jose Aldo, and he showed it even in the Nate Diaz fight where he could rock him. He didn't finish him, but he has the power to do so. Francis Ngannou is the same way. He uses boxing in the same similar fashion that Conor McGregor uses boxing 80% of his fights to win inside a mixed martial arts cage, and in particular the UFC. So what's the difference between Francis Ngannou and Conor McGregor? I think we know exactly what it is the fact that Conor McGregor is a pay-per-view star and Francis Ngannou is not. And we can talk about feelings, we can talk about sentiments, we can talk about the fact that Francis Ngannou was instrumental in African MMA, and in particular Africans within the UFC, and being part of this three champion, three kings type of era that they had going on, where they had Usman, they had Israel Adesanya, they had Francis Ngannou himself, the three champions of the UFC, undisputed, all from Africa, or were born in Africa, or has some kind of ties to Africa in some kind of way. But that is, of course, unless you are Dricus du Plessis and you beg to differ. Now, no lie, Francis Ngannou is not a pay-per-view star. So the UFC was not willing to risk a certain amount of money just so that they can make their lineal champion, or their current champion in which he was going to be had he re-signed, look really bad while he's a sitting champion getting knocked out by a world champion boxer. In boxing rules, which there are no shame in that, because that's just what MMA fighters do, right? They step in there with real skilled boxers or guys that just do nothing but boxing all day, and they go and take a payday. That's what that's what MMA fighters do for boxers, especially at the highest level. Now, here's the thing, right? Suppose Dana White wanted to somehow push back on this fight. Let's say it wasn't the Saudis that funded this entire fight. Let's say it was some other rival mixed martial arts competition out there to the UFC, which ironically there really isn't any. So the Saudis are a competition in that sense, because even though they haven't really delved into mixed martial arts the way that the Emiratis have in their partnership with the UFC in particular, the one thing that the Saudis have gotten involved in is high profile boxing matches like Paul versus Tommy Fury. That was in the cards. Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua. That was in the cards for them. And by the way, how about the Saudis offering Anthony Joshua a fight with none other than Deontay Wilder if he was to win his rematch against Dillian Whyte, in which he should have done that years ago when he beat Dillian Whyte in the first fight. But that's neither here or there. What is here or there right now is the fact that Dana White can't do anything against the Saudis. You got to understand something about the Saudis, right? These guys are a government. They are a sporting agent, a managerial sporting agent, and then a promotional company, all rolled into one. And they're also a monarch royal family. And all of this is all rolled into one. You can call it sports washing. You can call it trying to attract tourism in their country. You can call it, what's another word for sports washing? Neither here or there. The point of the matter is, the Saudis want to create an image for the world to see that, you know what, they are inclusive in certain matters. They are a sporting nation, just like everybody else, and they can host sporting events probably even better than other nations out there, which is what they're trying to prove with all these different events that they have going on. And not just with boxing, MMA, we're talking Formula One racing, we're talking golf, we're talking soccer, which, as you can see, they've signed a lot of big names in soccer, including Ronaldo, and among other niche names that you would know if you were a hardcore soccer fan or football fan, in which, wherever way you want to call it. But with Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury, let's talk about the technical aspects of this match, right? Because a lot of people are saying that they really don't give Francis a chance here, especially the boxing snobs of the entire online community. They don't want to give Francis any type of chance in this fight whatsoever. And I can't blame them, because Tyson Fury is a man who has known boxing since he was a little kid. He's known how to box. He's known how to dodge in and out. He's known how to jab. He's had thousands upon thousands of hours of doing it. Whereas you have Francis Ngannou, by the way, when he walked into Fernand Lopez's MMA Factory gym in Paris, he didn't even know what MMA was. He was growing up in Cameroon, where all he knew was boxing. He saw a few highlights of Mike Tyson, maybe not even full fight footages of it, but knew that he wanted to be just like this guy to a certain degree. He wants to emulate him in the fact that he was the baddest man in the world, in the fact that he had this star and notoriety around him. Well, fast forward a couple of years later, you have another fighter who's named after Mike Tyson. So what you have in Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury is the battle of Tyson's influence. If you remember, Tyson Fury and his dad have nothing but high praises for Mike Tyson in terms of the fact that they admit that he named his son after him, in the fact that he felt like he was in the same life trajectory as Mike Tyson during the 80s when he was coming up as a journeyman in England. And then you have Francis Ngannou, who was inspired by Francis Ngannou, who's inspired by Mike Tyson in all his prowess and all his magnificence and all his excellence and all of the things that Mike Tyson is known for as a knockout artist, as one of the meanest guys that you could ever face in a ring. And now you have these two guys that are coming into two different parts of the sporting world, and they're about to clash with each other. And not a lot of people are giving the MMA fighter a chance at all. In fact, I think they gave Conor McGregor more of a chance than Floyd Mayweather, with the exception, of course, of the boxing snobs that I was talking about, right? Because they would never given Conor a chance, even though Conor uppercutted Mayweather in that fight, caught him with a good shot that could have absolutely ended him. But to Floyd's credit and his veteran savviness, he was able to withstand that and was able to outlast McGregor into the 10th round. Now, with Francis Ngannou, could you say that that's the same thing that could possibly happen in this particular fight? Yes and no, because look, here's the thing about Francis you got to understand. He has historically beaten a lot of high-level strikers, guys that he was not supposed to win against, and guys that were supposed to give him problems based on the fact that they were technical masters at what they do. Alistair Overeem, high-level kickboxer turned MMA fighter. Rosenstruck, another example of that. Stipe, not a bad striker himself, was sort of a golden gloves champion himself before he got into MMA. In Cleveland, out of all places, by the way, Ohio, the state of Ohio, one of those states that are just really great in boxing, right? And obviously you've seen, the likes of Anderson. What's that guy's name? Jared Anderson in the mix. Ohio guy. Broner, Ohio guy. So they got a lot of good boxing pedigree in that part of the world, right? But one thing you have to understand about this particular fight is that sometimes maybe the pedigree of the fighter, of Tyson Fury, may not translate because of the certain type of power that Francis Ngannou possesses. All he needs is just one shot. Now, to counter that, because look, I'm giving you guys both sides of the coin in everything that I see in this fight, right? I'm looking at it from how Tyson is going to win and how Francis Ngannou is going to win. And the way that Francis Ngannou wins in most of his fights is with small gloves. Now, the question is, will his power translate going into a boxing match with 10-ounce gloves? And by the way, that's the official size in which they have announced the fight is going to be held at, 10-ounce gloves. Will Francis Ngannou allow his power to translate in bigger gloves? 6 ounces bigger, 4 ounce versus 10 ounces, 6 ounce difference. Can it translate? And how can it translate in relationship to the skills of Tyson Fury? By the way, I was going on a tangent about Ohio there, and I think it was because of Stipe being from Ohio, winning the Golden Gloves championship before he became an MMA fighter in that part of the world, which is very impressive. And you've seen what happened in the second fight with Stipe and Francis Ngannou. He knocked him out and even outboxed him in certain instances. But you also got to understand, Francis was able to outbox Stipe based on the fact that he was the better wrestler this time. In contrast, the first fight with him and Stipe just basically outgrinded him and outwrestled him all 5 rounds. But with Tyson Fury, does he have the susceptibility to getting knocked down the way that we seen in the Wilder fight? Multiple times he was able to do that to Tyson Fury. In all the fights that they've been in together, Wilder was always a dangerous guy in there, and he was just one shot away from always winning. But Tyson Fury was always the more technical guy that was just going to win the points and get the judge's nod based on his amateur pedigree. Because, by the way, the amateurs, in comparison to the pros in boxing, is just what you really do is try to outpoint your opponent the best way that you can. And that's all Tyson Fury has been doing his entire career. Nonetheless, how do I see this fight, man? I'm telling you what, it's very hard to make a prediction on this fight. I am going to make a prediction on this fight as it grows closer. But in a current moment of time right now, I could really see this fight being for anybody. I know that the senses are going to say that, well, Tyson Fury is the boxer. Yeah, we know this. But he's also the more experienced guy, and he's also the guy that has the susceptibility of getting knocked down. I've never seen Francis get knocked down by anybody. But at the same time, he is taller, and I'm talking about Tyson Fury. He knows how to fight in that particular height. Francis Ngannou is strong. He knows how to fight strong. So it's really anybody's matchup, and it really just is incumbent upon who shows up that night and who is well prepared and trained for this fight. I can't see how Tyson Fury is going to do anything different in terms of, the way that he's always been training. And I can't see how Francis Ngannou is not going to train his butt off for the biggest fight of his life, which, by the way, his biggest fight of his life is not within the discipline that he is the current lineal champion at. So now he has to eliminate the kicks. He has to eliminate his clinches. He has to eliminate his ever-growing wrestling skills that he has finally evolved from his last fight, in which he hasn't shown in his previous fight. We've always known he has a knockout power. He has the puncher's chance, but Fury knows how to box all 12 rounds. So that's what makes this fight very intriguing in and of itself. Now, why is it that everybody is calling this fight some sort of gimmick, some sort of, joke of a circus of some kind? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Francis is not the stereotypical boxer. He's not the prototype boxer. He's not a boxer at all. He doesn't have a record. And this bothers a lot of boxing people. But in MMA, you know what's funny? I can see an 0-0 jiu-jitsu guy, an 0-0 wrestling guy, like, for example, if, let's say, Gable Stevenson from the world of amateur wrestling, Olympic wrestler, gold medalist, wanted to jump in and take his first fight debut as the world champion, a world championship heavyweight fight against John Jones. It wouldn't be far-fetched for the MMA world to accept it. Sure, they would say, yeah, you know what? He's never been hit before. He doesn't know what it's like to be hit. He doesn't know what it's like to be clinched or kicked. All of these are true. But guess what? They are a lot more acceptable in the MMA world than they ever will be in the boxing world, where they believe in competitive architecture in some weird way. But in some weird way, they don't believe in competitive architecture, meaning that they'll give you 10 to 20 easy fights in the beginning of your career, guys that they know that you can beat. But then, once you're in the career trajectory of a championship career, I guess that's where all the competitive fights happen. But before those 20 other fights previous, what did they mean? Did they mean anything at all? Or is it that everybody in boxing is just coming up with their own arbitrary rules mixed in with the rules of tradition? That's for you to decide. Enjoy the fights.